Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. I said on my last video I like to break up the ultra depressing stories with something a bit more light-hearted now and then, so I thought this week I'd look at the strange world of Victorian Spermatorrhea devices. In the mid-1800s, English doctors became obsessed with the condition known as spermatorrhea. Now, I think this word does have a legitimate medical use, but back then spermatorrhea was used more as a general term for any semen lost through anything other than regular intercourse. This may be involuntary nocturnal emissions, or let's call it self-pleasure. Too much of this sort of thing was thought to negatively impact a man's mental and physical health. This idea was championed in 1835 by a French doctor named Claude Francois Lallemant. He wrote a treatise on spermatorrhea in which he said involuntary seminal discharges were sufficiently serious to disorder the health of patients considerably, and even sometimes to cause death. After too many seminal emissions, he said, the mind becomes enfeebled and incapable of protracted attention, and the patient feels that he is no longer fitted for his usual avocations. His disposition undergoes an equal change. He becomes morose and suspicious, fond of solitude. The body gradually emaciates, especially about the lower extremities. The aspect becomes dejected. The patient seldom raises his eyes to the person he addresses, as if conscious that the expression of his countenance would reveal his wretched condition. Digestion is impaired and accompanied by pain and flatulence, the bowels almost invariably costive. And so it was thought the patient would continue to deteriorate until something could be done to stop his discharges. There were quite a few medical procedures designed to stop a man having his emissions. One involved cauterizing the prostate gland, another involved injecting a caustic substance into a man's urethra. Some men even had acupuncture needles inserted into their testicles and prostate. In 1879, Dr. Robert Bartholow wrote of a procedure in which he treated a man's spermatorrhea by forcibly dilating the anal sphincter. He said, "The method as pursued by me consists of the introduction of a bivalve rectal speculum and then working the screw until the blades are sufficiently separated. The operation causes considerable pain and may rupture the sphincter if incautiously carried too far." I don't imagine there were too many men lining up to have these procedures done, even if it did save them from the dreaded spermatorrhea, and so a number of mechanical devices were invented instead. One solution was the spermatorrhea ring, also known as the jugum penis or the pollutions ring. The idea is pretty simple. The flaccid member is passed through the inner ring before a man goes to bed. Then, if he should experience any arousal during the night, his member will expand until those outer spikes start to dig into him. This would wake him up before he could have any of his deadly nocturnal emissions. These are some similar devices called urethral rings, which anatomically that name doesn't make much sense to me, but there you go. Much like the spermatorrhea ring, these devices were designed to alert the sleeper to any nighttime erections. I can imagine the risk of accidental injury was pretty high with these things. I mean, what happens if you roll over onto your belly while you're wearing it? I suppose it shows how serious people were about this condition that these things were actually manufactured. Another weird invention was this, James Bowen's surgical appliance. As described in the patent filing, the operation is as follows. The cap is fitted on the head of the organ, and the clasps are attached to the hair around said organ. Simply put, these cables attached at one end to the wearer's pubic hair. If he experienced any nocturnal tumescence, his hairs would be pulled painfully and he would wake up. In 1903, Albert Todd filed 2 patents for devices designed to stop nocturnal emissions. One is a simple spiral of metal wire sturdy enough to stop any unwanted rigidity. The second is a much more elaborate device, a hollow tube worn over the organ with a bell at one end. If the wearer experienced any arousal, the alarm would sound and it would wake them up. Both devices also included a metal coil designed to go around the scrotum and deliver a constant electrical current to the area. These electroshocks were thought to cure various sexual disorders and other nervous conditions. The most sinister thing about these two devices is the measures implemented to stop people removing them. The coil apparatus has a thick wire running through the straps to prevent someone from tearing through them. The Bell device has spikes at the end of the tube as described in the patent filing. At the inner edge of the tube and projecting towards the body of the patient is a series of short points or brads. These are of sufficient length to cause considerable annoyance and pain to the patient should any attempt be made to manipulate the penis by means of the tube, thus serving to prevent weak-minded and insane patients from practicing self-abuse. This is one of the creepiest aspects about all of this. As spermatorrhea was thought to cause mental problems, it was often patients in mental institutions that were forced unwillingly to wear these devices. I don't know about you, but I think if I was strapped into a device that electrocuted my balls and sounded an alarm every time I got an erection, I'd probably develop some new mental disorders rather than have them cured. And here's another strange device, patented by Frank Orth in 1883. It consists of a sort of hollow envelope designed to enclose the genitalia. The man's member goes into the hollow tube, which has a special valve designed to react to any expansion. The whole thing is hooked up via a hose to a supply of ice-cold water. As you've probably guessed, any unwanted growth in the nether regions would cause the valve to open, sending freezing cold water into the tube and causing significant shrinkage. Yet another torturous device was invented by John Long in 1889. It works in much the same way as many of the other instruments shown in this video. A ring around the genitals reacts to any sudden change in girth. In this case, it closes an electrical circuit which sends a painful shock to two metal rings placed on the man's fingers. A lot of other wearable devices were basically some variation of a chastity cage, some even had spikes on the inside. Some of the inventions strayed away from the crotch, but they still looked pretty uncomfortable. Special anti-wanking mittens, straitjackets where the arms were sewn to the side so that the wearer couldn't reach their junk. This strange looking invention was patented in 1908 by Clarence Fraser. The idea was to keep the knees up like this with the two straps around the legs and another one around the neck. This, he claims, would stop sleep wear or the bed sheets from rubbing against the wearer's crotch, thus eliminating one of the leading causes of unwanted arousal. It would probably make it impossible to sleep as well, so at least you wouldn't have any wet dreams, I guess. Spermatorrhea devices were still being patented well into the 1900s. This idea had real sticking power. Eventually it fell out of favour, although we do still see vestiges of it today. If you're familiar with NoFap, Coomerism or No Nut November, you'll know the idea that seminal loss being linked somehow to a person's character and their mental health is still a pretty popular idea among some circles. Thankfully, its modern incarnation seems to be a voluntary show of restraint rather than something that's forced on mental patients. So, I hope you enjoyed this slight change of pace for the channel. I do like to mix up the content now and then. I'm not sure if people will find this sort of thing interesting or disgusting. If anything, I might have given you some ideas for Christmas presents. So, big thanks to the patrons. Your support is highly appreciated. I wouldn't be able to cover these weird sort of topics without you because I doubt it's monetizable, so thank you very much. If you're new here, then check out my channel and here's some more videos you might enjoy. Until next time, goodbye.